In every moment of life, whether we are aware of it or not, we are transmitting signals. These signals are not simply words, facial expressions, or body language. They are the invisible but undeniable currents of energy that radiate from within us. When someone enters a room before they even speak, there is a sense you feel, something that tells you whether you are drawn closer or whether you instinctively step back. This is because energy cannot disguise itself. It reveals the truth no matter how carefully words or appearances may be arranged. Energy does not lie, and because of this, it becomes the most authentic form of communication between human beings and the world around them. Many people spend their lives perfecting masks, constructing identities, and creating versions of themselves they believe others will accept. They rehearse words, craft gestures, and present carefully chosen images to appear in control, happy, or powerful. Yet, no matter how convincing the performance may seem, the energy behind it will always leak through. You can say, "I am fine." But if inside there is turmoil, the vibration of your being betrays you. You can smile in public, but if your energy carries bitterness, it will reach others before your words do. The body can be trained to perform, but energy cannot be manipulated in the same way. It reflects the true state of the heart and mind without hesitation. Consider moments when you meet someone new. Within seconds, you form a perception of them, and often it is not based on their words, but on the frequency they carry. A calm person transmits peace. An anxious person radiates tension. Someone burdened by resentment transmits heaviness even in silence. This is why we often feel drained after spending time with certain individuals and uplifted after encountering others. The exchange of energy is continuous, unfiltered, and more honest than any spoken language. Energy is shaped by intention. What you carry within your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs crystallizes into the energy that surrounds you. A person who holds gratitude, compassion, and clarity within will radiate warmth and strength that others feel without explanation. A person who clings to anger, envy, or fear will emit vibrations that repel or disturb. This truth is both humbling and empowering because it means that we are responsible for the quality of energy we bring into the world. Every thought entertained, every feeling nourished, becomes part of what we transmit. In relationships, energy reveals more than words ever could. When trust has been broken, when respect is lost, or when love is no longer present, the energy between two people shifts, and no amount of polite conversation can disguise it. You may try to force harmony, but the vibration of disconnection lingers. You may deny the presence of conflict, but the atmosphere tells the truth. Likewise, when genuine care exists, no misunderstanding or disagreement can fully sever the bond because the underlying energy remains intact. Energy communicates continuously, and its language is impossible to falsify. The alignment of energy is not only important in human interaction, but also in the relationship with oneself. When your outer life is not aligned with your inner values, the dissonance manifests in exhaustion, dissatisfaction, and a lack of peace. Pretending to live one way while feeling another fractures the harmony of your being. Energy exposes the gap between authenticity and illusion, reminding you that no matter how well you construct a facade, you cannot escape the frequency you carry within. This is why practices such as meditation, mindfulness, and conscious breathing are powerful. They do not merely calm the mind, they recalibrate energy. Silence allows you to observe the quality of your inner state, to notice whether your energy is turbulent or steady, fragmented or whole. Through awareness, you begin to refine what you project, not by forcing yourself to appear calm or kind, but by actually cultivating calmness and kindness within. The outer reflection changes when the inner source shifts. Energy also reveals itself in environments. Step into a space where conflict has recently occurred, and you will sense the residue of hostility. Enter a place where people gather in sincerity, and you will feel uplifted even without knowing the story. This is why sacred sites, natural landscapes, and places of deep stillness carry such profound resonance. They hold the imprints of countless vibrations and amplify what has been released there. Likewise, our homes, workplaces, and communities absorb the energy we continually contribute, shaping the atmosphere in which we live. When energy does not lie, it becomes a mirror for self-reflection. If you notice others often respond to you with tension, perhaps your own state is restless. If people feel safe opening their hearts in your presence, perhaps you are transmitting acceptance. Observing these responses without judgment allows you to recognize the invisible influence of your being. Instead of blaming others for what they feel in your presence, consider the possibility that you are responsible for what you radiate. To understand that energy does not lie is also to recognize that healing and growth cannot be achieved by surface adjustments alone. Changing appearances, altering speech, or adopting rituals will not transform the vibration of your being if the core remains untouched. Real transformation requires going beneath the surface, confronting the roots of anger, fear or pain, and releasing them so that lighter, freer energy can emerge. Pretending to be healed does not create healing. Only the true shift in energy confirms the depth of change. The law of energy is universal and impartial. Just as a seed planted in fertile soil will grow according to its nature, the energy you cultivate within will manifest outwardly in its purest form. No force can conceal it, no mask can override it. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are always broadcasting the essence of your being. This is why self-mastery is not about controlling appearances, but about refining the quality of energy you carry. Energy does not lie because it is not bound by the illusions of the mind. It flows directly from the source of your state, unfiltered and unedited. It reveals whether you are aligned or fragmented, whether you live in truth or in contradiction, whether you are at peace or in conflict. To recognize this is to become more conscious of what you nurture within and to understand that at every moment you are shaping the unseen but undeniable force that defines how the world experiences you. There are moments in life when silence feels like abandonment. When the voices you expect to hear are not there, when the advice you crave does not arrive, when the world seems to respond with nothing but stillness, the heart often interprets this absence as neglect. But if you observe closely, if you shift your perception from the surface to the depth, you begin to realize that silence is not always emptiness. Very often, silence carries the greatest form of support, one that goes unnoticed because it doesn't come dressed in noise, words, or visible gestures. Support disguised as silence is not about doing nothing. It is about holding space without interfering. Think of a tree standing quietly in the background. It does not speak, it does not clap for you, it does not remind you of your worth with constant affirmations. Yet, in its stillness, it offers shade, oxygen, and presence. The tree's silence is a gift, a support that sustains without demanding recognition. Human silence, when aligned with care, has the same quality. It allows another person to face themselves without interference, to struggle and grow without someone rushing to rescue them prematurely. Many people equate support with visible action. They think if you care, you should speak. If you support me, you should advise. If you are with me, I should hear your voice. But sometimes, words can interfere with a process that is meant to unfold internally. Imagine a seed buried underground. If someone keeps digging it up to check if it has sprouted, they prevent it from growing. Support, in this case, is not in constant attention, but in patience, in trusting the unseen work that the seed is doing beneath the soil. Silence has a power that spoken words often lack. Words can soothe, but they can also shape dependency. When silence is offered consciously, it grants you the space to discover your own answers, to connect with your inner strength, and to realize that growth does not always require external validation. In that silence, you begin to hear your own voice more clearly. You begin to recognize that the strength you thought you lacked was there all along, hidden beneath the noise of expectations. Consider the way a master teaches a student. A master may give initial instructions, demonstrate the path, and then step back. The silence that follows is not disinterest, but trust. The student must walk, stumble, and rise again. If the master were to intervene every time, the student would never develop resilience or clarity. Silence here is the teacher's deepest act of support. It says, I believe you can find your way. There is also the silence of listening. When someone sits with you without interrupting, without offering solutions, without trying to fix your pain, you may feel alone at first, but gradually you notice that this kind of silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It says, I am here, I see you, I hear you. It is a silence that holds rather than neglects. And often, this kind of presence heals more deeply than words ever could. We must also look inward at the silence we keep for ourselves. There are times when the mind seeks answers from the outside, asking others for directions, searching for constant advice. But real transformation often comes when you sit with your own silence. Support for yourself in its truest form is to refrain from drowning your doubts with endless noise, to allow stillness to reveal what the constant chatter hides. It may feel uncomfortable, even painful, to sit in such silence, but it is within this space that clarity arises. In life, support disguised as silence also appears as unanswered questions, delayed responses, or even absence from those you expect to guide you. It can feel like being left alone. Yet, aloneness is sometimes the most fertile ground for discovering independence. If someone always holds your hand, you never learn to walk on your own. If someone always carries your burden, you never feel the strength of your own shoulders. Silence in this sense is not rejection but empowerment. The challenge is in the interpretation. The mind wants immediate confirmation, reassurance in obvious forms, but the heart can be trained to recognize subtler expressions of care. Support may not look like help, but like space. It may not sound like advice, but like silence. It may not arrive when you demand it, but exactly when you need it most, even if you don't recognize it at the time. Think of the vastness of the night sky. Its silence does not shout encouragement, but in its stillness you feel humbled, connected, expanded. It does not speak, yet it supports you in remembering your place in the universe. The ocean, too, offers silence in its depth. Beneath the crashing waves, there is a quiet vastness that sustains countless forms of life without ever announcing itself. So often, the deepest support is invisible. It is not in the applause, but in the pause, not in the instructions, but in the invitation to listen inwardly. Not in the constant presence of words, but in the quiet trust that you will find your way. Silence is often misunderstood as absence, when in truth it can be the purest form of presence. There is a form of destruction that does not arrive with loud noises, visible wreckage, or clear evidence. It is not the type of sabotage you can easily point to and say, "Here, this is where it began." It is more delicate, almost invisible, and yet its consequences are no less significant. This is what can be called subtle sabotage. The silent undermining that often comes not from external enemies, but from within one's own habits, thoughts, and choices. It is so quiet that it frequently passes unnoticed, until one day the structure of life, which seemed solid, begins to show cracks that were forming all along. Subtle sabotage begins with small compromises. A person tells themselves that skipping one commitment does not matter. They rationalize that one negative thought, one outburst, one indulgence is harmless. And in isolation, perhaps it truly is. But the nature of subtle sabotage is not found in a single event. It is the slow accumulation of these events, the erosion that takes place gradually, the way water wears away a stone not in a day, but over years. When observed from afar, it looks like nothing happened until suddenly everything has changed. What makes this type of sabotage so effective is its disguise. It rarely announces itself as a problem. It dresses itself as comfort, as ease, as a justified response. It whispers in the mind, "Just this once, it doesn't matter. You deserve it. No one will notice. Tomorrow, you can correct it." The danger lies in the acceptance of these whispers as truth, because the mind prefers comfort over confrontation. It accepts the softer path. But what is chosen for comfort today often becomes a chain tomorrow. Subtle sabotage is present in the thoughts we repeat to ourselves. When the inner dialogue constantly reinforces limitations, doubts, or excuses, it builds a framework that cages action. The words may not be loud, but repeated silently. They shape identity, saying to oneself, "I can't, I am not enough, this is too difficult," even in quiet moments, is a form of sabotage that dismantles potential before it can even take form. It is not external failure that holds someone back, but the silent sabotage of their own mind. Another layer of this sabotage comes in the form of procrastination. Not the dramatic kind, but the subtle delay that disguises itself as preparation, as waiting for the right time, as gathering more knowledge. Yet while time slips away, so does energy, focus, and opportunity. The sabotage is not in doing nothing once. It is in the quiet pattern of postponement that becomes a way of living. By the time recognition arrives, years may have passed under the illusion of not yet. Relationships, too, are vulnerable to this quiet destruction. It does not require betrayal, shouting, or conflict to damage a bond. Often, neglect, small dismissals, unspoken words, and taken for granted gestures are enough. A missed moment of attention here, an ignored expression there. Subtle sabotage weakens the connection invisibly. Over time, the absence of presence is more harmful than any argument could have been. Even within discipline and practice, subtle sabotage plays its role. Missing one day of training, one day of meditation, one day of reflection does not feel like sabotage. But when the missed day becomes 2, then 3, then habit, the practice dissolves. The sabotage was not dramatic. It was hidden in the comfort of, I will continue tomorrow. The truth is, tomorrow is the easiest place to bury the responsibility of today, that the body itself experiences this form of sabotage. Small choices in diet, movement, and rest, each one insignificant on its own, accumulate quietly. The effects are not immediately visible, which makes it easy to dismiss them. Yet over years, the body reveals the truth: energy diminished, strength weakened, health compromised. Subtle sabotage is patient, it does not rush, it waits. Awareness becomes the first line of defense. But awareness is not simply seeing the big things. It is the sensitivity to notice the quiet, the almost invisible. To observe the mind when it justifies, to observe the body when it resists, to observe the emotions when they seek comfort over growth. The challenge is that subtle sabotage often aligns with what feels easiest in the moment. It disguises itself as kindness to the self, when in truth it is avoidance. This type of sabotage thrives in the absence of mindfulness. Where there is no conscious attention, habits move in automatically. And most habits are formed not by deliberate design, but by repetition of the comfortable. So the task becomes one of observation, to notice when the self is being quietly undermined. To question, is this choice supporting my direction, or is it softly pulling me away? The subtlety of sabotage means it cannot be defeated in one grand gesture. It requires daily vigilance, small corrections, a return to alignment again and again. It is the art of noticing the whispers before they grow into commands. It is the discipline of refusing to trade long-term clarity for short-term comfort. And it is the recognition that what weakens a life is rarely the obvious storms, but the quiet drips that erode its foundation. In life, one of the greatest sources of inner disturbance is not the external world, but the lack of constancy in our own presence. Presence is the capacity to fully inhabit the moment, to exist with awareness, clarity, and intention. It is the quiet force that allows one to truly see and to truly act. Yet when this presence becomes inconsistent, the mind drifts like a leaf in a restless stream. One moment there is focus, the next there is distraction. One moment there is awareness, the next there is forgetfulness. This fluctuation creates tension not only within the mind, but also within the body and spirit. Inconsistency in presence is like breathing halfway. Imagine the lungs never being fully filled nor fully emptied. The breath remains shallow, incomplete, leaving the body restless and the mind unsettled. In the same way, when presence is fragmented, the actions taken are half-hearted, the words spoken are only partially alive, and the life lived feels unfinished. The human being becomes divided between the illusion of doing and the absence of being. This inconsistency arises because the mind is conditioned to wander. It clings to memory, projects into the future, and loses touch with the only reality that truly exists, the now. Presence requires a discipline of returning again and again to this moment. But most people are trapped in cycles of distraction. They think of what has passed or what has not yet arrived, and so their presence fades like smoke in the air. In this state, even the most ordinary task becomes a burden, for it is carried out without rootedness. When presence is inconsistent, life begins to feel heavy. A person may sit at a table, but their mind is not at the table. They may listen to another, but their attention is scattered elsewhere. They may walk down a path, but are unaware of the ground beneath their feet. Such a state creates inner conflict, because the body is in one place while the mind is in another. The two are not aligned, and this disconnection weakens energy. Energy leaks through the cracks of divided attention. To understand inconsistency in presence is to understand the nature of the mind. The mind, like water, flows in the direction of least resistance. Without guidance, it spreads everywhere, following impulses, desires, and fears. Presence is the act of guiding this flow into a channel. It is not about force, but about awareness. Just as water contained by a riverbank gains strength and direction, so does the mind gain power when it is held steady in the present moment. But the inconsistency shows up when one loses this awareness and lets the current scatter once again. Consider the way a flame responds to the wind. When the air is still, the flame stands tall, steady, and bright. When the air shifts unpredictably, the flame flickers, sometimes almost disappearing. Presence is the flame, And the inconsistency of our attention is the wind. The more restless the wind, the more unstable the flame becomes. Yet, with the cultivation of awareness, the flame learns to stand even when the wind blows. This is the art of stability, remaining present despite the constant movement of thoughts and sensations. Inconsistency in presence also reveals itself in relationships. When one is not truly present with another, the connection weakens. Words may be exchanged, but they lack depth. Actions may be taken, but they lack sincerity. True presence is a gift, for it carries within it respect, care, and acknowledgement of the other. When this gift is absent, even unintentionally bonds weaken. The inconsistency becomes not only an internal conflict, but also an external fracture in the human experience of connection. The path to addressing inconsistency is not to demand perfection, but to embrace practice. Presence is not a switch that turns on and stays on. It is more like a muscle that strengthens with repetition. Each time the mind wanders and each time one notices and returns, presence grows. The inconsistency itself becomes a teacher. It reveals the fragility of attention and at the same time the possibility of returning to clarity. When presence is cultivated consistently, a transformation occurs. Life does not become free of challenges, but it becomes free of unnecessary fragmentation. Actions become more deliberate, words more mindful, and thoughts more aligned. The body feels lighter because it is no longer pulled in multiple directions at once. Energy consolidates, and with it comes strength. This strength is not the strength of control, but the strength of alignment. It is the power of being whole in the moment. Inconsistency in presence, therefore, is both a challenge and an opportunity. It is a mirror that shows where the mind has not yet learned stability. It reveals the patterns of distraction that steal energy. It reminds the individual that life is not found in memory or imagination, but here in this exact breath, in this precise heartbeat, in this single step. To return again and again to presence, despite the inconsistency, is the essence of discipline. Comparison is one of the most subtle thieves of inner peace. It enters the mind quietly, often without being noticed, and begins to color the way one perceives oneself and the world. At its root, comparison is an act of measuring your own life, your own worth, your own achievements against the life of another. The problem lies not in the act of observing differences, but in attaching value and identity to them. When the mind says, I am less because they are more, or I am worthy because they are not, then the natural balance of life is disturbed. Comparison creates division where none was meant to exist. It shifts focus away from inner growth and places it upon external validation. Competition emerges from the same soil. It is comparison that has been sharpened into a weapon, driven by the need to win, to dominate, to stand above. While competition can fuel effort and discipline, it also has a shadow. It can create restlessness, dissatisfaction, and the endless chase of being better than someone else. But better in whose eyes? According to whose standard? The competition born out of insecurity is never ending, for there will always be someone stronger, faster, richer, or more skilled. The mind then remains caught in a cycle of striving, never arriving. Comparison begins early. From the time one is a child, the mind is conditioned, grades, appearances, possessions, talents, all compared, ranked, and judged. Without awareness, these early seeds grow into adult lives where success is not measured by inner fulfillment, but by how one stands relative to others. It creates a life that is reactive rather than intentional, a life constantly seeking approval rather than truth. The tragedy is not that comparison exists, it is that it blinds one from seeing the unique unfolding of their own path. To see clearly is to recognize that no two journeys are the same. A flower does not compete with the tree beside it. The river does not compare its flow with the mountain. Each expresses itself according to its own nature. The distortion comes only when the human mind forgets this simple truth. When one compares, they reduce themselves into numbers, into categories, into hierarchies that have little to do with the essence of who they are. What is overlooked is the reality that the value of life is not measurable. Competition, when viewed through a narrow lens, may seem to sharpen skill and determination. But when viewed from a deeper perspective, it can be a trap. It binds energy outward. It directs attention to beating another instead of mastering oneself. The most meaningful competition is not against another person, but against the limitations of one's own mind, body, and spirit. To rise above laziness, to overcome doubt, to discipline the wandering thoughts, this is true competition. Here, the opponent is not outside, but within. Comparison and competition often fuel discontent because they operate on the illusion of scarcity. They whisper, there is not enough. If another has, you cannot. If another rises, you fall. This mindset breeds envy, jealousy, and resentment, yet life is abundant. The sun does not run out of light because it shines on many. The sky does not become smaller because countless birds fly through it. When one realizes this, the grip of comparison begins to loosen. Energy wasted in constant comparison drains the mind of creativity. Instead of asking, what can I bring forth from within myself? The mind keeps asking, how do I measure against them? This keeps the focus outward, never inward. And so growth becomes stunted, not because ability is lacking, but because energy is misdirected. The more one compares, the more distant one becomes from authenticity. The more one competes externally, the less one notices the internal calling. To live beyond comparison does not mean blindness to others. It means seeing others with clarity, but without judgment. It means recognizing differences without turning them into hierarchies. From this place, admiration becomes possible without envy. Inspiration becomes possible without insecurity. The success of another no longer threatens, but uplifts. Competition then becomes cooperation, a mutual rising rather than a race. Consider how silence within can dissolve the noise of comparison. When one sits in stillness, the mind slowly untangles itself from the web of opinions, judgments, and expectations. In that silence, there is no better or worse, no higher or lower. There is simply presence. From presence, one begins to act not to surpass another, but to fulfill one's own nature. The path of growth requires awareness of these traps. It requires asking, why do I feel the need to compare? Why do I crave victory over another? Often, the answers reveal insecurity, fear of insignificance, or attachment to recognition. When these roots are seen, they begin to lose power. The practice then shifts from competing outwardly to cultivating inwardly. Discipline, clarity, patience, these become the new measures, not trophies or titles. Comparison and competition are illusions that promise fulfillment but deliver emptiness. They distract from the essence of practice, which is to refine the self. Each individual holds within them a rhythm that is theirs alone, a path that no one else can walk. To honor that path requires courage, for the noise of society constantly demands comparison. But only by stepping out of that noise can one find the stillness where true strength is built. When one stands before a mirror, the first impression is often of the physical reflection. The contours of the body, the arrangement of the face, the subtle or sharp features that are visible in the glass. Yet the mirror test is not about vanity, nor is it about appearance alone. It is about recognition and deeper still about truth. The mirror is more than polished glass. It is a symbol, a teacher, and at times an unrelenting examiner of what lies beneath the surface. It does not bend itself to your desires. It does not flatter. It does not deceive. It shows what is there, and the lesson is whether the individual has the courage to see what is real. The mirror test begins when the gaze lingers long enough to penetrate beyond surface beauty or flaw. Most people look briefly, catching only what they wish to see or what they fear to see. They adjust hair, notice a line, perhaps focus on something small and familiar. But the test is failed when the gaze is only shallow, when the mirror is used merely as a tool for confirmation of the self-image already formed. To truly pass the mirror test, the one who looks must allow themselves to see the unfiltered presence that stares back. The mirror reflects not just the body, but the history written on it, the burdens carried in the eyes, the joy or sorrow that cannot be hidden. The face in the mirror is not static. It changes with time, with emotion, with the state of mind that governs the inner world. A smile transforms it. A shadow of worry reshapes it. A glimmer of peace softens it. And yet, the mirror remains neutral. Showing all without judgment, the one who looks must supply the meaning. This is the first challenge of the mirror test. Can you observe without judgment? Can you see the totality of yourself without immediately dividing it into what you approve of and what you reject? To pass the test is to see without denial and without attachment. Another dimension of the mirror test is the recognition of responsibility. When you look into the mirror, you are confronted with the fact that no one else can stand there for you. No substitute can reflect your face, your presence, your reality. What you see is entirely yours, shaped by your actions, your choices, your discipline or lack thereof. This realization can feel heavy. It means that excuses dissolve under the gaze of the mirror. Blame has no place there. Only honesty remains. To pass the mirror test is to accept this responsibility fully, to understand that what is reflected back is not an enemy nor a stranger, but the accumulation of your own path. Silence deepens the experience of the mirror test. To look into the mirror in silence is to allow the truth to rise without distraction. Words can be used to escape, thoughts can be used to explain away. But silence strips away these escapes. It leaves only you and the reflection with no barrier in between. In that silence, the question arises, do you truly know the one you are looking at? For many, the answer is uncomfortable. They know the roles they play, the identities they wear, the stories they tell themselves. But to meet the self stripped of all these labels can feel like meeting a stranger. The mirror test exposes this distance between who you think you are and who you truly are. Passing the mirror test is not about liking or disliking what you see. It is about facing it. To face oneself honestly is rare because it requires vulnerability. It requires acknowledging weaknesses and flaws without collapsing into shame, and it requires acknowledging strengths without inflating into arrogance. Balance is demanded, and balance is difficult. The reflection offers no shortcuts. It cannot be deceived by false confidence or hidden guilt. The eyes always reveal. The posture always reveals. The stillness or the restlessness of the gaze always reveals. In traditions where self-knowledge is regarded as the foundation of wisdom, the mirror test is not optional. It is central. If you cannot look into your own reflection with clarity, how can you hope to understand the world around you? If you cannot be honest with your own image, how will you be honest with others? The mirror test asks for alignment between the inner and outer worlds, between who you are in silence and who you are in action. It reveals the cracks where these do not match, where there is pretense, where there is hiding. The mirror test can also be seen as a practice of endurance. It is easy to look away quickly, to avoid what feels uncomfortable. It is harder to remain, to let the eyes rest in the reflection until the layers of resistance begin to fall. In the stillness of prolonged looking, something shifts. The reflection stops being just a face and becomes a window into being itself. The boundaries between self and reflection blur, and for a moment, you are both the observer and the observed. This is when the mirror teaches its deepest lesson, that what you see is both personal and universal, both unique and shared. The test shows you the impermanence of appearance and the persistence of essence. To engage with the mirror test daily is to commit to honesty as a discipline. Each morning, each evening, there is an opportunity to meet yourself anew. What you discover may not always be pleasant, but it will always be true. And truth, no matter how sharp, is the ground upon which real transformation is built. The mirror test is relentless, but it is also generous. It asks nothing more than presence, nothing more than courage, nothing more than the willingness to see